management, date and time management, how to have, play around with the formats on the dates. And then we also walk through conditional formatting, data validations as well, and some string functions. So today, like, I wanted to go through, start with macros, but before that, Sushmita had some questions last week around sorting of data on Excel. So she has shared a demo spreadsheet. Let me share my screen first. Okay, I hope you can see the screen. Okay, so
Yes.
this is a sample data which Sushmita has shared, and the questions were, so to sort the data based on timestamp. So it's a list of names, email IDs, some notice periods, and timestamp. So the question was around how do we sort based on timestamp. So what I'm going to do is, since this is Google Sheets, and honestly, I hate Google Sheets. So I'm going to download this as a Excel. So you can go to File, Download, and Microsoft Excel. I mean, it's just that there are so many limitations on Google Sheets version of Excel. So I just use the MS Excel version. So let me go to my. Okay, so the same data I've opened up in MS Excel. Sorting by dates, that's sometimes a challenge because the formats are not consistent across the data. The only thing you need to make sure is that the format is right. So what you need to do is just add a filter on the headers first and check if this is displaying as date. The simplest way to check that is check this sort oldest to newest. So that means that Excel has identified all the values in this column as date. So if there is one single value which is not in the date formats, it's some junk value. So it will not show that. It will show as A to Z, sort A to Z or Z to A, right? So so this means that the data is fine. So the simplest way to do it is sort by old or new. That's it. Sushmita, is this something you're looking for? Sushmita, are you there?
Hello. Yeah. Yes, Gautam. This should help.
Okay.
But this version, as you said, probably is not there in the Google Sheet. I mean, in the Google list of sheet. Do we have this?
Yeah, it should be there. Yeah,
it should be there, isn't it?
So select the column headers, go to data, filter views, and create a new filter view.
Okay.
Okay, and then you can just, this creates a temporary filter so that others cannot see the filter. Whoever else is accessing the same spreadsheet, they will not see this filter. It's only a temporary view just for yourself. So go to timestamp, and this the one of the things why I don't like Google Sheets. So it just says sort A to Z by default. It doesn't customize by the format. So just say A to Z. It will still sort by oldest to newest, but it just doesn't show that over here.
Okay.
So that was on the date and time sorting, and to sort based on notice period. Okay, so this is a bit exciting because if you see, if I open up the filter, you can see all the unique values here in that column. So the first set of values are consistent. I mean, there's a pattern there. It's some number space days. But in the end, you can see there are some values called immediate and less than 30 days. So you can't just sort it straight away. So you just need to like fix the values first before you can sort it. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to edit anything here. I'm going to add a new column, say notice 2 or something. So I'm going to use some formulas here. So the only two values I want to change is immediate and less than 30 days. I want to convert these two into a format similar to this so that I can sort it easily. So I'm going to use a if condition. If this equals immediate, then, so if it is immediate, then I will show as 0 days, or else if this is less, space 30 space days. And then just for the sorting purpose, I'll say 29 days, or else keep the same value. I'm just going to select this as the last else option. I just missed a bracket in between. Zero days, else again a second if condition, that's a nested if condition. If this equals less 30 days, then say 29 days, or else just leave it as this. Yeah, so I'm just going to double click on this corner here so that it copies the formula across all the rows. So there you go. All the data is in the same pattern. So I'm going to reapply the filters so that it includes this column as well. And you can sort by text. So you have all the 0 days in the beginning, followed by 15, 29, 30, 60, 90. Yeah, perfect. So does this answer your question, Sushmita, sorting by notice period?
Yeah, this is something which should help. When we have
Okay.
a huge data, this is, for example, there's only 30 data. Usually in our database, we do have data from 2 years. So you have, like, if there are more than 2000 plus data, and I want only immediate ones. So is this the only option, Gautam? Is that I want to copy this into a different tab and then sort?
I mean, it depends. Like if you can like update the same column, we try to have the same kind of pattern across all the values. So then it should be simple to sort it. The only challenge here is that since we have 15 days, 20 days, and then you have immediate, which is a completely different way. I mean, it's a completely different pattern. So you can't, sorting doesn't actually help there.
Okay.
So that's the reason I just copied that to a different column and then just change this to 0 days. So that sorting works alphabetically.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then to sort data based on month. And that should be simple because this is already in the date format. So if you just sort by oldest to newest, it's already sorted by date. You can just pick the month you want, or just select the specific month, say March of 2020. So it will just show those many rows.
Okay.
Yeah. And how to automatically copy data from one Excel to another based on certain keywords. Okay. Keywords. So what exactly do you mean, Sushmita? I didn't get the question properly.
For example, if you go to the indent column there. Yeah. Okay. So there are a couple of automation, API automation and Selenium automation. Okay. For example, I want all the Selenium automation in a different Excel sheet so that I want that data to go through a different process altogether. Okay. So no, I as there is a huge data, I want one set of data from the main sheet, this be the master sheet, and I want to replicate the sub sheet of it into a different thing. Okay. So is it possible to pick that data out based on the keyword there? Yes, you can. So in this filter, uncheck this and select the only one you want. Or you can just go to text filters and say contains Selenium. So it will just show the rows which have the Selenium keyword in it. Okay. Right. So then you can just copy the whole thing. It's a simple copy paste. Copy the whole thing and go to a different sheet and just paste it. Yeah, this is how we've been doing now. Okay. We're following the same thing. But for example, there is I'm just telling the real time, thing we are facing difficult with. So for example, there is a link which we have put out in LinkedIn, and there's a huge data which is coming. Okay. So I don't want to sit and manually separate the things. Once there is a keyword called APM in the sheet which is coming, it should identify itself and update into a different sheet. And so that I could give that sheet to the team. to look
Right.
into only the API things. Otherwise,
Okay.
no, it is difficult to go back to the main sheet again, sort, and I'll have to see, it comes, every data comes, right? So I'll not,
Understood.
which has gone through the interview, which has not gone through the interview. And again, it is a double task for rechecking that.
Okay. So I'm not sure how it can be done automatically. Like when you add data into the sheet, you want that to be taken
Correct.
automatically and dropped
Yeah,
into a different
based
sheet.
on some keyword. So
Okay.
when there is an indent APM, that is a keyword everywhere.
Yeah.
So if that could identify that keyword and import or the data from this sheet to the next sheet.
Okay. So this can be done using macros.
Okay.
So yeah, it can be done. So what, I mean, how it's going to work is you write the code. So where like a click of a button or you assign a shortcut to a macro. So you can do is it will go through each row, look for that keyword. And if that keyword exists, it can copy the whole row and paste it in a different sheet.
Okay.
So we can write a macro to do that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but you need to again click a button to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so that was on sorting. Let me jump to macros. So I'm just going to open up a new sheet. I'm sorry, new workbook. And okay, fine. I'm going to close this one. Okay, so macros is nothing but it's also called as VBA. That's Visual Basic Applications. So it's nothing but Excel's implementation of Visual Basic. So so how this works in Excel is that you need to have, how do I, yeah, fine. So you need to have this developer tab on Excel. So this is not visible by default. So what you need to do is go to your Excel options, start menu, Excel options, and enable show developer tab in the ribbon. So you need to tick this. And once you tick that, you can see this developer tab, which shows up on your menu. So here you can see something called macros. So there are two ways to do it. One is to just record a macro. So it will just blindly record every action you do and save it as a code, a Visual Basic code. I'll just show you how to do that. So click on record macro, give a meaningful name to it, say my first macro. And you can assign a shortcut key to it. So every time you want to run the macro, you can just use the shortcut key and it will just run the macro. So I'm going to say Control Q. Okay. And you can give a description if you want. I'll say, okay. So now you see that it is recording. And here there's a stop button. So the macro is currently recording. So whatever action you do, it's going to record it. So let me just add some values here. I'm just adding random values. I'll copy this, paste it here somewhere. I'll do a scroll action. Fine. So I'm going to stop recording. So now I'll go to macros. I can see my first macro here. I'll click on edit. So you can see that it has recorded all my actions as Visual Basic code. So this was, I clicked on a cell that's recorded B2 and I have entered Moolya there and I selected another cell. I entered 1, 2, 3, then I did a scroll. So it has recorded that as well. So I'm going to close everything, delete everything on the screen, and I'm going to press Control Q on my keyboard. So it just run the macro. So it has done the same thing. I'll just show you again in a different way. Go to macros, select this macro, click on run. So that just run it. So you can see this Moolya is in a selected mode. It's in a copy mode because even that was recorded. You can see here selection.copy. So that's where the macro ends. So it's still in the copy mode. So that's where the macro ends each time I run it. It's always in the copy mode. Okay, so this was just a direct, simple recording. This helps when the steps you want to automate are very simple and you don't have any, checking or loops or any logic involved there. You just want to like populate some values in some, exact cells every time. So in that case, you can use the record and playback every time. Otherwise, you need to code it. So go to macro again, give a different name. For example, I'll say just test macro. And if I type a new name which doesn't exist, you can see all these buttons get disabled. I can just create a new macro. Okay, so let me create a new macro. Okay, so you can see that it's all the macros are defined as functions. So sub is a sub function, and that's the name of the macro. Okay, and this follows Visual Basic syntax. So let me do something. So what I will do here is I will by code I'm going to add some value to this cell. So go back to the VB editor. I'm going to say first I'm going to select which sheet I want. But I mean sometimes you might have multiple sheets. I want to add some values on different sheets. So I'm going to say sheets is the function name, sheets, and pass the sheet name as the parameter. So here I'll say sheet one dot select. Okay, so then I want to add some value in some cell, say J16, for example. So go back to the editor, say range is another function. So pass the cell reference. So J16 dot value equals whatever value you want to populate there. So this is a test macro. Yeah, I just saved it. So when you want to save an Excel sheet which has macros, you need to select .xlsm, that is Excel macro enabled workbook. Otherwise, it does not retrieve the macro if you want to edit it. So you need to save as the XLSM every time. Okay. So go back to my spreadsheet here, macros. I can see the test macro here. I'll click on run. Yeah, so it has added this value here. So this is an example of the most simplest macro we can write. So I've just selected a sheet. I'll have populated a value in a cell I want. So let me do that on different sheets. So I'm going to say sheet one. I'll copy the entire thing. I'll just change the sheet names, sheet two and sheet three. Okay. So again, macros, test macro, run. Right. So now you can see it has ended in sheet three. So because that was the last sheet we selected through the code. So it has entered the value in sheet one, it has gone to sheet two, done the same thing, and the same in sheet three. And suppose the sheet doesn't exist, for example, I'll say sheet 13. So it will throw an error. So again, macros, test macro, run. So it'll throw an error, subscript out of range. Okay. So you just need to be careful with the parameters we pass. So that was a very simple example. Let's take it up a notch. So what we'll do is I'll populate the squares of numbers from 1 to 100. Okay, so we have to use loops for that, right? So in the same macro, I'm going to say we need a loop. So the format is for loop because we know the number of iterations. For, I'll use a variable I, I equal to 1 to 100 and next. So this is how you define a simple for loop in VBA. So for variable name equal to 1 to 100. So every iteration it's going to increment the value of I starting from 1 to 100. So if you want to like just have, I mean, even numbers or have jump 3 iterations every time. So you can have the step parameter to it, step 3. So it's going to jump by 3 numbers every time. So I'm not going to do that. So inside the loop, I have to scroll through this list of cells and I want to populate the squares of numbers from 1 to 100. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll have another variable j equals I into I. So j will always hold the square of the number I. So now we have the square. So we just need to populate the value there. So range, again, the reference of the cell, it's always the column followed by the row number. So that is, it's always column A, but every iteration, the row number is going to change. So I'm going to use a concatenation operator, that is and ampersand. So that concatenates strings together. So A and the variable I, right? So the first iteration, it's going to say A1. The second iteration, it's going to say A2, right? close the brackets, dot value equals j, because j holds the value of the square of the number. So that's it, right? So go back to the sheet here, and I'm going to run the macro. There you go. So it has calculated the squares of numbers starting from 1 to 100 to the code. Okay. That was a very simple one. So suppose I want to add some text saying the square of 1 is 1, the square of 2 is 4. So I want to add that kind of a text instead of just displaying the numbers. So what I'll do is value equal to the square of ampersand operator, that's the concatenation. The square of I is j, right? So I'm going to delete this. I'll run the macro again. Yeah. Yeah. So you can just play around with that code here. So maybe I'll do the same thing. Cube of numbers. I'll just say j equal to I into I into I. And I'll say the cube of I is j. So I'll run the macro again. Yeah. So it's going to display the cube of all numbers from 1 to 100. Okay. So that was a simple for loop inside a macro. There's another shortcut. I mean, you might have noticed every time I want to run the macro, I'm going to macros and I'm then selecting macro and running it. So there are two other ways of doing it. One was, as I said, the shortcut. So the third one is to add a button. So when you click a button, I want that macro to run. So on the same developer tab, go to insert and add a button. So I'll just add a button on my spreadsheet. So when I add the button, it's going to ask me which macro do I want to run. So I'm going to select test macro and click OK. So if I just click on this, it's going to run the macro. So to demonstrate that, I'll click this button and it just runs the macro for me. Okay, so if you want to edit this text on the button, you can do a control click. It goes to edit mode. Run my macro. Yeah, there you go. So this is like the fastest way to run macros. Okay, so that was a simple for loop inside a macro. So we can, I'll take a example. For example, let me go back to spreadsheet. Here I want to have a simple interest calculation sheet here. So let's say I'm taking the principal amount, then the interest rate, and the time taken, the duration. Okay, and here I want the values of total interest and total repayment. Okay, so through the macro, so when a user enters the values here, I want the macro to calculate the interest and the total amount to be repaid. And also I want an option saying, is it simple or compound? So here last week, as I showed you, I'm going to use a data validation because I want the user to only select simple or compound. So it's going to add a small drop down here. Okay. Say amount, I'll say 10,000 rupees. Interest is say 7%. Time is say 3 years. Fine. So in the macro, let us define a new macro for this. Calculate interest. Create. Okay. Now I want to first fetch these values into the macro. So I'm going to say, I'm going to assign 3 variables. P, that's the principal, equal to range, as we did earlier. We need to give the reference to the cell, that is, this is column B1. So B1 value. Similarly, rate of interest equal to range B2 dot value and time equal to range B3 dot value. So I have all the required values for my calculation. So then I need also the whether the user wants to calculate the simple or the compound interest. So this is reference B11. Say int type, I'm going to say range B11 dot value. Now, so now first I'll check whether the user wants a simple or a compound interest. So I'm going to have an if condition. So if int type equal to simple or int type equal to blank, I'm just going to say blank, then, so this is how you define an if condition. So if given the condition this or this, you can have n number of parameters inside this if condition. Then do whatever is inside this block and end if. So unlike Java, where we use brackets to define blocks, so we don't do that here. We just have end if condition. I mean, end if statement. Similarly here for as well. So we have just a next statement. So whatever is inside this block is going to be executed in the loop. So similarly for if condition, I have a end if statement. So whatever code I write inside these two statements, it's going to be inside the if condition. Okay, so int type equal to simple or int type is blank, the user might not select it. So I'm going to default it to simple compound interest. So I'm going to say interest equal to P into T into R by 100. And total is nothing but the principal plus interest. So P plus interest. Okay, so we have done with total is a keyword, so we don't have, I mean, we can't use that as a variable name, so I just changed it. So now we just have to populate these values in the cells we need. So interest is in B7 and total is in B8. So range B7 equal to interest and range B8 equal to total repayment. That's it. Okay. So that's for simple interest. So for compound interest, I'll just use a else block. So if the user has not selected simple or he has not left it blank, so the only option is compound. So there's no way of the user selecting any other value apart from these three. So this has to be the compound interest. So the formula is total repayment equal to principal into 1 plus R by 100 total to the power of time. So this is the compound interest formula. P into 1 plus R by 100 to the power of time. Okay, so we have got the total repayment. We need to calculate the interest here. So it's the other way around. Interest equal to total repayment minus the principal amount, P. Okay, so we have done the calculations. We just have to populate it on the screen. So yes, okay. So that's it. We are done with the code. Let us run it. So I'm going to add a button again and assign calculate interest macro here. I'm going to click it. Yes. So it has calculated simple interest because I have not selected anything here. So total interest is 2,100, which is right. That is, yeah, that's correct. And total repayment is interest plus principal, which is 12,100, which is correct. So I'm going to select compound. So click this button again. Oops. So if you click on debug, it's going to show exactly which line has the problem. Maybe it's missing. Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. I missed the multiplication operator. Okay. Yes. So that has worked. So it's showing the interest and repayment. Let me just test it. Yeah. 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 Fine. So we can again rename this. Calculate interest. Okay. So here we have what we have covered in the macro is we have taken a couple of values from the sheet itself, done some calculations. We have used if conditions, and we have populated the value into a different cell. Okay, so now if you want to take some value from the user at runtime, so if not on, I mean, if not from the spreadsheet itself, when you start running the macro, if you want to take some value from the user, so there's a way to do it. So I'll say username equal to, so the function is input box. So just say input box and say what prompt. So I'll say, what's your name? We're just going to close it because that's the only, mandatory parameter. Okay, so at the end of the calculation, I want to just display a message that the calculation is done. So the function is message box, msgbox, message box. Remember, input box is just to take input from the user. Then there'll be a text box which comes up on the screen, and message box is just to show a message. The user cannot enter anything there. So in the prompt, I'm going to say, I'll say hello and the username. Calculation is done. Okay, let's test it. What's your name? I'm going to say Goutham. Yeah. So hi Goutham, calculation is done. So it's reading the value from an input box and it's displaying that back on the message box. Okay, so that's one way of taking input from the user directly. There are other ways. For example, in the input box itself, I'll say user. So here, I'll just say an "Are you sure?" confirmation message, followed by, this is same as a message box, but you can give few more parameters. You can see all the, in the tooltip, you can see some text in square brackets, which means that they're all optional. So the second parameter is I can define a specific set of buttons on the message box, say either yes or no, or abort, retry, ignore, right? So I'll say VB yes, no. These are system defined. You cannot give any random text. You have to select from this list. Say, I'll just say yes or no. And I'll give a title to my message box, say confirmation screen. Okay. So here, I want to proceed with the calculation only if the user has selected yes. So I don't want to do anything if the user has selected no, right? So I have the user response in this variable. I'll just use a if condition. If user response equal to VB yes, then, okay, I'll put this end if at the end of the whole thing. So only if the user response is yes, only then it's going to proceed with the entire calculation. Okay. Otherwise, I'll have a else condition. I'll just say message box calculation not done. So this is in case the user selects no, right? Okay, let's go back and test it. That's my name. I'll say, okay, so it's asking me, are you sure? So I'll say no. So it says calculation not done. Fine. I'm just going to delete these values just to show that the macros have worked. I'll say simple, okay. So I'll say yes this time. Are you sure? Yes. Yes, it calculates the interest and it's showing calculation is done. Okay, so that is taking input from a user directly at runtime. We use a message box function and show what is the message, what is the question you are asking the user. This can be okay, cancel, or yes, no, abort, cancel, retry. So you can select from the list itself. And this is the title of that message box. Okay. That covers the basics of macros. Just looking at the time, I'll take any questions if you have. No?
Goutham, we have something in the chat. Darshan has messaged.
Okay, 1 second. Code indenting is happening automatically, or we have any keyboard shortcut? Okay, do you mean when you say code indenting? Okay. Honestly, I'm not sure. I've not done that. So you can just Google it. I'm not sure. I've not done that before. So you can Google it, and I'm going to do that after this session. In any other question? Or there might be something in the format align. I'm just checking. I'm not sure either. Nope, I'm not sure.
Any other questions that we have? It could be on macros. It could be on the previous session on tips and tricks also.
Just another point, you can even have functions within a function. So for example, in this scenario, we have calculated both compound and simple interest inside the same function. So ideally, you could separate that. You could write one function to calculate only the simple interest and another function just to calculate the compound interest. And in the main function, based on the selection, you can just redirect, or just call the respective function. Say, for example, I want to run this test macro at the end of this here. I just say test macro, that's it. Yes, it does run that test macro. Okay, any other question, please? Okay, so just a feedback, do you think this is going to be useful for you guys?
Just unmuted everybody's mic. You can feel free to ask questions.
Hello Goutham, Darshan here.
Hi Darshan.
Yeah, like this is going to be good use for me if I could integrate this with Selenium. For me, for example, while preparing reports of an automation script, if I can execute this macro by calling it through script, something of that kind?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have not done that integration with Selenium, but I'm sure
Okay,
there's a
okay.
way to do it.
Yeah, this sounds
Yeah.
interesting in that field for me.
I mean, you can do all sort of, I mean, complex stuff using macros. Like you can generate a report in MS Word using data from Excel sheets, or you can even call a web service endpoint on the internet and even receive the response back through macros.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, no questions, I think. So just to summarize, I mean, this was just like the basics of macros. It can become very, very complex. Like, for example, there was one project earlier I worked on when I was in the UK for Department of Work and Pensions for the UK government. So there, uh, I had built a regression automation suite using Excel macros, where they had this complex spreadsheet with all the pensions information, and they had a web service endpoint. So which I took the data from the Excel sheet, fired the web service endpoint, received the response, and generated a comparison report. So that ran into like thousands of rows. So it can, I mean, you can just play around with it. Okay, so I think, I mean, I hope the session was useful. So any feedback you guys might have, so I'll be happy to receive it.